Hello everyone and welcome to the Policy Hub. This is a room which is being hosted by Sustain, the Alliance for Better Food and Farming, and the Soil Association. The sessions are going to be about an hour and a half, about an hour of discussion and 30 minutes of questions. It's been live streamed, so we'll have online and in-person questions. Please wait when you've got a question for the mic to come to you, because otherwise it won't be picked up by those online. And please make your question a question and not a statement, please. And this is, we're delighted to present this session. It's Making Public Farmland Work for the Public Interest. And I'll hand over to Laura, our chair. You good?
Yeah. Okay. Welcome. Making Public Farmland Work for the Public Interest. So public farmland is a diminishing resource. Cash-strapped local authorities keep selling it off. But it could be an asset that's really useful and valuable for their own policies and aspirations around regenerative farming, good food and local food systems. So for this session, we've got two case studies, Paris and Powys. And we've got local authorities represented by Gary and Mazarine who are devising strategies to make best use of public land. And we're also going to speak to civil society organisations who are working in partnership with those local authorities to enact those policies. So I'll just introduce our panel. This is Alice, who is the coordinator. Thank you, Local Authorities and Territories Coordinator for the Access to Land Network, which is a Europe-wide network of initiatives with local authorities making that happen on land. Gary Mitchell is from Powys. He's a county councillor for Powys since 2022. Also, he is Chief Exec at Social Farms and Gardens. He's an advisor to the Welsh Government on their Food and Drink Advisory Board. And he's also one of the founding members of the Access to Land Network. These guys are working on Farms for the Future, Future Farms, which is using public land, getting new entrants to farming onto public land in Powys, creating new agroecological farms. So Gary is working directly with Kim Graham from Shared Assets, which is an infrastructure organisation enacting their values of social justice in practical projects on the ground, connecting the relationship. It's about the relationships with people and land. Mazarine is from City of Paris, the central district of Paris. She is a PhD researcher working in the services of City of Paris. And her thesis is about using public land for resilient food. And Matthieu is working in partnership. Matthieu is a co-director of Terre de Liens, which means land of connections. Isn't that lovely? I want to be part of it. And so these guys are working in partnership. And I mean, Terre de Liens is all over France, isn't it? But this is an example of partnership. And so Matthieu is working to acquire farms for agroecological farming, and also to support farmers to put in place infrastructure and climate resilient farms. So let's start with Powys. I was going to give you the clicker, that would be a good idea, wouldn't it? Here you go. Tell us a little bit about the context in Powys and the actions that you're working on the ground there.
Thanks. Let's see if we can get technology to do what it needs to do first. I might need to aim it somewhere else. Let's see. There we go. So Laura's kindly done the introductions for us. Do come and grab us after if you get a chance to, if you've got any specific questions that you don't get a chance to ask during the sort of session here. But I think we've got plenty of time for Q&A, and we definitely want to make it that sort of interactive session. So I'm Gary Mitchell. I have the unfortunate position as a county councillor within Powys local authority. We're a deeply rural local authority. We're one of the largest local authorities in the whole of the UK. We're the largest in England and Wales, and actually we're only outdone by the Highlands and Islands in Scotland. So Powys covers a third of Wales. We don't have any big towns or cities. We do have a range of market towns, but we have a massive sort of rural hinterland. And the community that I support is actually the largest rural ward itself in the whole of England and Wales as well. Tiny little community called Llanbrynmawr and Trefeglwys. Beautiful, but vast. It would take me an hour and a half to drive from one end of my ward to the other end. And if I stop and see a farmer, that's half a day gone because they haven't seen anyone for 3 days. And within the local authority, I chair, or my technical title is the lead member for the Farmer State Advisory Group. So we have a body of county councillors that advise the cabinet of the council. Cabinet in council make the decision on recommendations from officers, and in some cases from advisory groups. And I am the lead member of that advisory group. Powys is relatively unique in Wales. It has managed to retain a good number of its local authority farm holdings. Currently got 133. As Laura indicated, though, there are considerable financial pressures. 10 years ago, we had 168. There are currently 10 for sale this year alone. There are forecast to be 10 more sales next year, and probably each year for the next 5 years if we don't do something about our pretty dreadful financial situation. So our farm estate is declining. It isn't a statutory provision. It's not something we have to do as a local authority. We have to bear that in mind. We have statutory responsibility for children, adults, education, all sorts of things, but farming isn't a statutory statutory duty, and therefore it's under pressure, because some people might say, well, why are you doing it? And if we've got very clear reasons why we're doing it, we can still do it. If we haven't, then perhaps the capital asset is worth more elsewhere. We also own 40 blocks of woodland, which is quite unique. We don't do anything with it. We're pretty poor at managing them at all, but we've got 40 blocks of woodland that we could do much more with. And in total, 10,700 acres today, a few less tomorrow, perhaps. Population, 133,000. So, as I say, spread out across a third of Wales, only 133,000 population to work with, mostly engaged in rural activities. Mostly sheep and beef farming. Very, very few arable farms within our estate or within Powys, and very, very few even dreaming of doing horticulture and fresh food production. But there are, and is, an active community scale around fresh fruit and veg. And that sort of follows the national stats for Wales, really. Just 0.2% of our agricultural land is used for horticulture in Wales. 0.2. It's pretty shocking, really, when we are a very green and rural country. And the research shows us that we only need 2% of that land to feed all of our communities in Wales with 5 a day fruit and veg. So it's not don't need a massive increase to do more. Veg consumption is pretty shocking in Wales, or fresh fruit and veg. We're lowest in the UK now, the stats are showing us. Just 2.4 portions a day is the average in Wales. The target is 5%, so we're nowhere near that, but actually the guidelines are 7%. 7 portions. So we're nowhere near it. There's no point promoting 7 if we're nowhere near 5. But we've got a lot of work to do still on promoting it. And I have the pleasure of being sort of multi-hatted across many things. And one of the things that we're working with is the Future Farms Partnership. And I want to just spend a minute or two talking about that in specific relation to here. What we're doing is we're trying to rethink the way that our farm estate might support newer, younger, hard to use the word younger, shouldn't do that really because we can't discriminate, but new entrants into farming, and particularly keen on supporting those that are interested in agroecological, sustainable food production. Primarily fresh food, but it doesn't have to be. I don't mind if they got micro dairy, pigs, goats, sheep, beef, whatever, as long as they're doing it sustainably. And what we've done is we have acquired one of our bare land holdings, a 38-acre holding on the edge of a small village called Sarn, extracted it out of the farm estate, if you like, and put it into a trust of partners, of which came from shared assets and many others are involved. The local authority is a partner, Social Farms and Gardens, Our Food 1200, and a whole range of other ones, Lantra supporting us. And what we're aiming to do is to pilot a different way of farming, micro-farming. But we've had to sort of create a strategy, how we're going to do that. And we've done it in phases, really, with phase one being, what do we need to worry about? And actually, in our area, we need to worry about planning issues, particularly planning barriers, how it's really hard to build homes on bare land in countryside. And we had some help from Welsh Government to do that. They actually commissioned their own research and report into planning barriers for small-scale agriculture. That really helps us. It's a Welsh Government report that says these are the issues. Interestingly, the issues are different from what I thought they were, because we get a lot of questions and support from growers around the issues that they have. And actually, when Welsh Government did the research, they said, it's not really an issue. Nobody really ever applies for planning permission for what you're doing. And when they come to us because they're in enforcement processes. So they haven't gone through the planning process for all sorts of reasons. And then eventually they get caught out. And then we come and try and help them. So I guess that was interesting to learn. In Powys, we have managed, with the support of our partners, to produce specific planning guidance for the whole authority and the planners within the authority now that promotes rural enterprise dwellings for agroecological food production. Published on our website, and if somebody now applies under it, they can use that guidance to say, you should allow me planning permission because of X, Y, Z. We aim to turn that into supplementary planning guidance, because at the moment, we've got the support of the council and the local authority. It's there, it's a published strategy, if you like, but it could change at the next administration. If we get it into SPG, supplementary planning guidance, it goes through a public consultation, and it stays there for as long as somebody has to fight really hard to remove it. So that's our next step, get that into SPG. We've also developed toolkits, training, dissemination for both growers and for planning authorities and planning officers. So we've already supported growers on how to do this. And we've managed to get a ministerial statement from the Deputy First Minister just before Christmas, how he and Welsh Government want to support horticulture and agricultural fresh food supply within Wales. So he's helping us from the top end, saying, yeah, we want to change our strategies and our policies. And we've got some assurances from planning policy team in Wales, in Welsh Government, that they will look at revisions to TAN 6, that's our current rural policy, and also an intensive agriculture technical advice note, so something that challenges those big industrial chicken units, big dairy units, and pig units that we're seeing. So that's potentially exciting. Phase 2 was testing that planning guidance. So we've actually got the land. This is the site, lovely flattish piece of land. It's got a river running through the middle of it. Bare, so it has no facilities with it, no electricity, no water, no buildings, anything like that. But it was the one that was available to us in the timeframes that we needed. And what we're doing now is we've put a planning application in to build 3 homes, and they will look like that lovely little picture there. So they're affordable, temporary dwellings that could be turned into permanent residences. 2-bedroomed Nissan hut homes, coming in at around about, he says, fingers crossed, £45,000 a piece. Super insulated, sustainably heated and hot watered, if you like, off-grid. So they will be completely off-grid because it costs a fortune to connect to the grid if it's not already there. So they'll have solar, PV, battery backup, and a backup generator supply to keep them running all year round. The planning application went through. It took a while. It wasn't plain sailing, I'll be honest. Cost a fortune, lots of reports, as you can imagine. We've gathered all of that learning, and we're sharing it publicly with anyone that wants it. So all of our impact assessments, all of our SUDS applications that we now have to do in Wales, so that's sustainable urban drainage, tipped into that. What else have we had to do? Tree impact assessments, river quality assessment, everything that you can dream of we've had to do, drainage strategies, all of that sort of thing. And we're sharing it for free. We got the planning permission. Phase 3 is let's get on and build it, and we are in the building stage now. So homes are starting to be built, packing shed is starting to be built, access off the highways is starting to be built. And eventually the dwellings will be situated close together because that just makes sense in terms of planning and infrastructure and stuff. And each of them the growers will get access to between 6 and 8 acres, and we are retaining, as the partnership at the moment, 5 to 10 acres of communal biodiversity land. So we are very keen that the land around it gets improved for nature and for climate. We're going to do some river riparian restoration, so planting the river margins on both sides just to help that runoff. And then we'll be planting trees, orchards, better grasses, if you like, in terms of wildflower meadows and meadows in general, and just more a different way of farming than it's been farmed for its eternity, really. We had recruited 4 growers. We're not quite there yet with 4 on site. But anyway, that's our current phase of where we're at. So we're developing the site, and they are coming onto the land now under a license agreement at the moment to begin to work the land already, and their homes will hopefully be ready early spring, he says, convincingly. End of March is my target, but that's a funding target, not necessarily a practical reality. So I think that's a sort of whistle-stop tour of the Future Farms Partnership, and I'm going to offer Kim the chance, if that's okay, Laura, to add to my notes. Thank you.
Is this on? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So hi everyone. I'm Kim from Shared Assets, and we're like Gary said, there's many partners involved in this partnership. We're a relatively small one, but what we've kind of brought in is that I've done a fair amount of research on council farms before, so kind of have that that background about why they're at risk, but also why they're kind of uniquely placed to perhaps deal with some of the multiple issues that we're trying to tackle around local food supply, jobs, biodiversity, and so on. So bringing that kind of experience into the steering group, as well as the experience that we've had with Terre de Liane and the other members of the Access to Land network across Europe, where people are experimenting with all different ways of working between civil society organisations, new entrants, and local authorities, which you'll hear about more of in a minute. So kind of, yeah, forming some of those links in terms of knowledge across Europe to see what we can learn from each other. But I guess the main role that I've also had in this partnership is been working closely with our colleagues at Land Workers Alliance so as Gary said, there's been specific Powys planning guidance produced. Us and Land Workers Alliance have been working closely with growers who have navigated with more success or less across Wales, but especially in Powys, to deal with the planning system, to kind of learn from their experiences and produce another guidance document which is meant to complement the one which is kind of officially for the planners, although of course people can read that too, but we've designed one which is meant to be even more kind of accessible and use step-by-step guidance of how you would put in a planning application in Powys as a new, or doesn't have to be new, but as an agroecological kind of small-scale grower, and meet all those planning kind of rules and things to make it successful. So that's coming out very soon, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. And then we're also going to run a bit of training, online training for planners from across Wales who are interested in maybe how they might adapt some of the guidance that's been produced through this project to their area, and to just kind of, I guess, tackle some of the maybe like myths or assumptions that some planners might have about why small-scale farming doesn't meet current planning guidance when it actually might. So yeah, if any of you are planners in the room or you know planners in Wales who might want to come to that, give me a shout and I can pass on the details. But yeah, mainly our role in the partnership, like I said, has been working with new entrants and growers in Wales to work on that guidance, and we're also will be involved in kind of shouting about a lot of the learning that's come out, which Gary has mentioned as well, over the coming months. So yeah, that's it from me.
Thank you. I can see that's how practical and useful that is. So why does the council need to work with shared assets, and vice versa? Why is shared assets wanting to work with the local authority? Do you want to start, Gary?
Yeah, thank you. Good question. I think many of you know local authorities are very good at some things and pretty poor at many others as well. And we simply don't have that expertise. We don't have that local connections, that local knowledge of the detail of everything we're trying to do. And the Farm Estate Advisory Group have recognised there could be a different model of farming to complement the more traditional agriculture we've got. And in my opinion, one 38-acre holding could now become 3 farms and generate 3 lots of income for the local authority or the partnership, however it works. So actually, instead of losing farms and farmers, even if we're having to lose some of our assets, maybe we can retain the sort of status quo. So I can help create the vision for that, but I certainly haven't got the skills and the connectivity and the capacity even at all. We have no money, we have no budget for all of this, so we have to look at strong partnership working and really then relying on the partners to bring their levels of expertise, and that's what our partnership, I think, does really well. We're trying to be the more silent partner as the authority. We're just the enabler. We've got land. Let's see if we can use it differently. But those with the skill sets, I think, is where we want to bring to us and help us learn and understand. And that's part of me being here, really, as a county councillor, is heading out to all those other sessions that we've got on in front of us as well and sucking up that information and disseminating it. So for me, it's about knowing where your skill sets are, knowing where you can influence, and then being brave enough to let others get involved as well. And authorities aren't very good at that, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that, so I think for us, we've, as Shared Assets, we've done research on the sort of issues that are being experimented with in this project. All the other partners bring, like Gary said, other skill sets, whether it's on biodiversity, nature-friendly farms, planning. There's such a wide range of partners involved in the partnership. I can't go into all their expertise, but I think from my perspective, it was just super exciting to be involved in this as a chance to actually experiment on the ground with some of the things that we've been researching and some of the things, we've seen from other partners and other places across Europe, and work through the challenges that obviously some we would have anticipated, others we never would have thought of. And yeah, because of that kind of the strength of the partnership and willingness that we have a kind of common goal to work towards, we have the kind of good faith to keep working through those challenges together and see what we can learn and then share with others. So yeah, for us, it's really about bringing those different skill sets and working through the challenges of doing something like this in practice as opposed to just in theory. Yeah. Right,
because it's not replicable one from another, because every place is really different. Paris is really a contrasting example, being so urban. Let me hand over to Mazarine to give an outline of the context that you're working in there.
Thank you very much for this introduction, and thank you, Powys. So I will shortly introduce the context of Paris. As you know, Paris is a really urban city, is a hungry city, as Caroline still say. So inside of Paris is 2 million people, inhabitants, and around the surrounding, the agglomeration is 12 million people. So it's really a lot of people. And also Paris region, so maybe the surroundings, is also half of this Paris region is composed with Arab land. Oh, sorry. Yeah, then you can see. So Paris is in the middle, is the red, and surrounding is Arab land. So half of this region is open space, so that we produce cereal, salad, and cheese, actually. We have also a lot of forest. And we also have a lot of horticulture close to the city. And this horticulture, of course, declined because of many reasons, but one of the reasons is the urban spread. And since 10 years, Paris is wanted to provide urban agriculture inside of Paris, but it's also a long process. And I will talk more about the food policy, which integrates some action on farmland, and that's why we are here today. So since 2020, Paris is aimed to provide organic food in the school restaurant. And that was really the beginning point of the food policy. So they want to develop a food cooperative strategy around the Seine River. So that's why you see this grey area. They are members of this food strategy. So you have Le Rouen and Le Havre, which are Normandy agglomeration from Normandy. And you also have Paris agglomeration, which is part of this food policy. This food policy is really structured around procurement of food for public restaurants and organic food. And I will focus my presentation after this context on the action on public farmland. So maybe you ask why Paris have public farmland outside of Paris and far from Paris. So it's the pink The pink on the map is the public land. The blue point are public land where there is a project led by Paris in order to support the creation of micro farms. So just to repeat, to say a bit more about the origin of this farmland. So this farmland is linked to heritage for health or social or environmental policy in the 19th century, most of them. For example, in the 19th, the mayor wanted to provide water resource, good quality of water resource, so that's why they bought a lot of sources far from Paris. It's the zone when you see the grey slash, let's say. So that the sources are bought by Paris. There are also a huge social policy. Hospital, childrenhood, protection house, retirement house, summer camps. And as you know, maybe we also have some financial issues. That's why some summer camps were sold, some childrenhood protection house or hospital were sold. And now, because of the, as in Powys, the tendency is to sell all this building and this farmland. But because of this food policy I told you before, the city of Paris began a new inventory of this farmland and all this land, building and farmland, in order to see if this farmland have an agriculture potential. So they estimate that 250 hectares have agronomic potential because of the characteristic, soil, size, easy access, and also building who can host a farming family and also a farming activity. So this farmland is not empty. Sometimes it's used, it's rented to farmers. And sometimes it's vacant land. So in this inventory, thanks to this inventory now, this land in this inventory couldn't be sold. So it's a real progress for us. And City of Paris support creation of microfarm, and I want you to show you an example of a project led by Paris. So this is a vocational education training center. As you can see, the castle. So it was a donation in the 19th centuries, a donation of a philanthropic industrial who wanted to have a philanthropic project for children. And nowadays it's still a social place for children. Yeah. And it's a 45 hectares park with forest and land. And as in red, you can see the part with are rented to new farmers in order to install a new microfarm. In this also they find a housing for these new farmers. So as you can see, is a really speed process. So in this center they find under-occupied grassland and a abandoned orchard. So it's the project occupy 5 hectares, and it's an opportunity for new farmers, a new entrant to find access to land. And the contract between the farmers and the City of Paris is a rural lease with environmental condition. So it's an organic farm. Yeah, what is interesting too is that the farmers here, she's producing flowers and fruits. And she began herself into an urban agriculture farm inside of Paris. And then after testing herself, training herself, she decided to go in a bigger plots outside of Paris. So it's also a really good process to see how this urban agriculture is a place for training, and then after you can have confidence and go in a bigger farm. And maybe it's one of the points of this project and the action led by Paris. We also have, as you see on the first map, some other action. We are all, because of the competence we develop into this project of creation of farmland, of a microfarm, sorry. Some other local authority are asking us advice. Or sometimes my colleague help them to also provide some new microfarms. And I will let Matthieu speak about, we also have a partnership with Terre de Liens.
So it's all happening in Paris, like having this kind of background of this strategy with such high aspirations to sort of leap from. Feels really forwards from my point of view. Matthieu, Terre de Liens, Paris has not only supported Terre de Liens to use this land, but is also investing in Terre de Liens. Cool. Yes, Paris. Why is that? Why is that part? What are the synergies that enable that?
So we are a foundation, so I wouldn't say that the city of Paris invests in a foundation, because they give us money and we are never going to give the money back. That's the principle of a foundation. But like you see that they own farmlands, and they can also buy farmlands. But they were, I think, really clever, and they decided to not do it alone and to ask for a partnership with specialists of farmland acquiring, which is us, Terre de Liens. We basically buy farmlands for putting farmlands in common goods. What's really important to understand is the grants that they gave us. They gave us like a 200,000 euro grant to buy farmlands, and to buy farmlands within 250 kilometers from Paris, which is about like 165 miles or something like that. And what it's important to understand is this grant will act as a catalyst, because it enables us to mobilize additional citizen and public funding to co-finance the acquisition. So like they will put 200,000 euros, and we will buy like for €1 million farmland. So that's really, really interesting for us and for them to have this kind of impact. And we have like common goals, and like the 3 main goals of this project, I can give you them, like give you those, like starting from our goals and joining theirs. Like our goal is to acquire strategic farmland, particularly where it's at risk of disappearing under urban or economic pressure, and to establish sustained organic farmers, ensuring fair and sustainable access to farmland, and to contribute to Paris' sustainable food strategy, which is aims for a lot of organic product in municipal catering, as you said. So that's like the first is our goal, and the last is our goals, but we join, it's all common between us. And what I'm gonna add is like with the support of the city of Paris, we'll acquire like probably 6 farms in 3 years, representing like between 500 and 1,000 acres. Each operation will be backed with citizen funding and other public subsidies, especially water agencies, to protect the water resource. And it's a start. It's small, but it's growing, and we are building our partnership with the city of Paris to go further and buy other farms after that.
Thank you. So we've got 2 case studies and some, because Alice, you've realised projects in 7 different European countries. What have you learned?
So yeah, my job here in this panel is to convince you it's not only these brilliant guys who are able to work on land. And indeed, with the Access to Land Network, we've been working on understanding how local authorities can do better, either with the land that they own, but just also with land in general. And we looked at case studies in 7 different countries. And those countries obviously have different they have different local administrations and different local fabrics, but we tried to understand what were the common points for all the local authorities that we studied, and what ways they can work on land. And we distinguished like 3 roles that local authorities can take. They can obviously, like we just heard, act on the land that, like, take action on the land that they own. So this means just using it responsibly to produce the food that we eat, to store carbon, to provide jobs. So that's what we called acting as a landowner. But then there's also, even if you don't have land or you have very little means as a local authority, you know the local actors and you have the legitimacy to orchestrate the dialogue around land in your area. So that's what we called acting as a facilitator. And I really like what you said around trying to be the silent partner in the partnership, actually, because local authorities can really create just a favorable environment for organizations to work together. And finally, in most countries, they have regulatory tools that they can use to work on land. So obviously this is going to vary from country to country, but generally they have tools around land planning. In France, some local authorities have tools around land intervention, almost being able to intervene in the local markets. So these three roles, owner, facilitator, regulator, they actually even work for other public services. You can think of transport, etc. But so we try to like detail them a bit more. And if you're a local authority and you want to come up with a land strategy, you might want to look at all the actions on the wheel and be like, oh, have we done this? Have we thought of this? I'm just going to go back and just give one example per role so that it becomes a bit more concrete. So acting as an owner, obviously we just heard two brilliant examples, but we could take the example of the city of Ghent in Flanders, Belgium. They didn't really invest part of the wheel, but they at least put a moratorium on selling public land. So in 2019, they decided we're going to stop selling public land for 6 years, and then we're going to do a strategy. That's the strategized part. And to do that, they convened farmers, they did workshops to come up with a vision for how to use the public farmland that would work for them. They also built on previous experience trying to manage that farmland differently. Back in 2017, they did a call for tender and like tendered out some public land for like a new agroecological farm. They had a lot of issues doing it, and they learned from that and tried to build that learning into the strategy that they came up with. And of course, you have to share sometimes with other owners of public land, and actually a lot of public land around Ghent is owned by the social welfare center. So there's this whole, or, you know, sometimes you have to work with land trusts or foundations like Terre de Liens. So it's like about how do we understand what it means to be a more responsible owners, and how do we share practices with other people who are trying to be more responsible owners. Because it's often an abandoned area of policy. It's not a statutory thing that you have to do. So it's lost knowledge, basically. Regarding facilitator, I would like to give the example of land banks, municipal land banks that we studied in Spain. They're going really far. So as you might all know in this room, access to information on land is a sort of access to power. So first of all, this network Regenerative, which is training local authorities to set up these land banks, they train local facilitators in the authority to survey the land, in particular underused land, which is, I know it's not a thing that you have much in the UK, but they have a lot of it there. And so they try to map this land, and then they try to mediate the relationship, meet the landowners, and make them meet with the new farmers that might be interested in farming this land. And they go as far as drafting the contracts. And like even the municipality provides like a guarantee, like a backup. If the farmer's not going to pay rent, they're going to pay for them. So that reassures the owner, and they are able to draft contracts, and then they do all the other parts, because then they work with the local restaurants to purchase the produce from these farms. So they do all the consumer sensitizing. They create also like local food labels, like the Regenerative label, to show which products are coming from these underused abandoned land new farms. And then final example, regulator. I'll take the example of the
Grenoble metropolis in France, which is a fairly big city, but it's in a mountainous area in the southeast of France, and they understood quickly that if they want to retain any farmland, they had to stop building. And regarding planning, they declassified 188 hectares that were planned for urban expansion to keep it into farmland, in the land use planning. But then they advocated at the national level to have stronger protection of that farmland. And now we have a tool called peri-urban protected perimeters. Basically, you can sanctuarize a piece of farmland. It's really hard to change the status of that planning afterwards. So they're doing that. They also have a convention with the local land agency to be notified around land sales. And when the land sale of a strategic land is happening, the metropolis puts money into buying it, and they have, like, I think now 4 or 5 metropolis farms that, coming first circle, are being used to provide local food for the local citizens. So here are just like 3 examples to illustrate a bit that.
So there's a huge amount that local authorities can do, a huge amount of different roles that they can play. And by the way, this lot is all available online. You can go and access this resource. It's absolutely beautifully presented and really, really useful. Just out of interest, can you give me a wave if you are from a local authority, if you're acting? Okay, so brilliant. At a farming conference, we've got local authorities. I love this. So probably most people, I'm waving to the camera, are joining us online who are from local authorities. So speaking to the local authorities, what tips do you want to give to those guys?
There are lots. There are lots in this online resource. But if I go back to what we've been talking about here, public farmland, we advocate for this having a holistic strategy and inventorying all your land and being able to map it, etc. But we know this is also a lengthy process, and we know political terms are short, and you also want to have concrete results at the same time. So it's a good idea when you build a strategy to also develop a few very concrete projects so that you can show results, also learn and gain legitimacy in doing this work. We've also observed in our case studies a lot of friction between the timing, and you said some words about that, the timing of farmers and the timing of the administration, the time that you take to validate within your council the building of a well, the drilling of a well, or the greenhouse, validating the funding for this, and then the farmer's like, I have to plant my seedlings now, or my whole season is going to be over. So anticipates the difference of timings that will happen, and that's a very important thing. If you're in a peri-urban area, you also want to look at, well, maybe the accessibility of those farms for the public, but you also want to anticipate what kind of land use conflicts can happen. Who's going to pick the dog poop, if the people are coming and strolling with their dog, if there are issues of stealing farm material, etc. The local authority needs to be there to, help the farmers. If they really want to make this land accessible, it's going to create some kind of friction as well. And then finally, I would say, don't shy away from communicating about what you do, because we see a lot of local authorities doing all this great work. We know it's hard political work, and it's not easy to defend. So I've seen authorities in Belgium just put a giant board and say, this is public land, and it's creating that many jobs and storing that much carbon for you, citizens. So just a few ideas, but it's difficult work, and we know, it's brave work as well, so.
Yeah, thank you. So if I come to the local authorities, do you want to speak to the other local authorities who might be thinking about starting something like this on their public land? What would be your tips from your experience?
Yeah, I think my main tip is you have to try and be a bit brave. You have to, perhaps, it's not really radical in our interest, is it? But in a local authority, it's probably pushing the boundaries a bit, stepping out of your comfort zones, and taking a few risks, and local authorities are pretty poor at taking risks. That's how they manage their what they do is, let's do another risk assessment, let's do another one, let's do another one. And all of that is terribly boring and takes forever. And ultimately, there might not even be a risk there. So for me, it's about looking outside. So don't just keep doing what you've been doing for years because that's what you've done. There's all sorts of different ways we can think about things, but you've got to be prepared to take that next step of jumping in, 1 foot perhaps first, but get involved, take those risks. I think you're right, Alice, around, as a local authority, we have to strategize, we have to create policy, and we have to create momentum and development, but all of that takes us a long time as well. But actually, if we start to influence those policies, that's where we have a hope of creating that long-term plan. I'll just argue in, let's say, Powys, in our local authority, we're going through a local development plan. So that's our national planning framework for the next 20 years. If we don't get that right now, and we're meant to have completed it next year, we're stuck with it for 20 years. So if we get it wrong, it's really hard to undo that. So you've got to have those conversations at the right place, at the right time. I'm really jealous. We had a moratorium on sales in Powys. 3 months we managed to get till the end of the financial year. Didn't give us very long, but they have given us 9 months to create a future farms policy. So that's a bit better. I think we can do that. But in the meantime, I'll have lost another 10 farms. I have to live with that ultimately. So I think, yeah, we've got to do policy and we've got to do strategy and we've got to engage around it. But I think we can't just keep doing what we've done. We've got to think a bit differently. Thank you.
Being brave and doing something new. And we've got local authorities like you guys leading the way, so it's not totally new. So, thank you. Mazarine.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. We have to be brave, and we have to, as a local authority, have to take a risk because they always have to be exemplary and model. And but as an example, as Powys and other local authority, maybe in Access to Land, we have plenty of examples that show that it's working to create micro farm on a public farmland. And to my point of view, what is really important is also the food awareness, also the goodwill of political, which is really, really important. And to my mind, of course, farmland is really important, but as an urban city, there are also a lot of public land which are used for the food system. I will speak about school, restaurant, and also all the transformation of food. So we need space for farming, of course, for a land for producing, also a land for storage, a land for cleaning and peeling vegetables, a land of cooking and transforming, and maybe all these steps have a land space for a footprint. Yeah. And it's really interesting to think about also this footprint of all this land for the food system. And maybe public land, could be a good beginning point to think about that. Yeah, and also to my as a tips, it's also as a urban city. Again, it's important to think about the reciprocity because we used to say like, "Give us our food, your food, please." And what's next? What can we return to this land as I don't know? And that we have to construct that again with cooperative partnership and stuff. Yeah.
Thank you. So, to the civil society organisations that are working with the councils, do you want to say what are the challenges of working with the councils, but maybe more importantly, how have you addressed, how have you managed those challenges?
Yeah, sure, I can start. So, I mean, this is thinking not just in the Future Farms Partnership, but maybe more broadly our work with local authorities. I think echoing a little bit what Alice said, you have to be prepared to work very slowly and then very fast, and it changes between it rapidly. So yeah, I would recommend for anyone else in a sort of civil society organisation thinking about doing this to build in as much sort of slack as you can in the system, because things will, even if you anticipate they're going to go slow, they will go even more slowly than you think as it works its way through various levels of bureaucracy and things that we're just not used to as a very small organisation. But then once things do get decided, you have to sometimes move extremely fast. So you have to be quite willing to work at different paces and kind of change things up. I guess another kind of problem that we've encountered sometimes is that different parts of the council are not on the same page. So you might have a really enthusiastic, I don't know, like parks team or something that wants to work with you on food growing. But then when the finance department hears about it, you know, they're not necessarily singing from the same hymn sheet. So you can feel a little bit caught in the middle as a civil society organisation, and I think the way to counteract that is to make sure you have someone, you know, like Gary in the Future Farms Partnership, to really be your advocate and your kind of point person to help you navigate through those systems of council bureaucracy and things like that, and kind of put your case forward and not leave you being the one trying to work out what the overall council position is, but they do that work for you. And also I think another way that we kind of deal with working with local authorities is just that we try and bring in a little bit of our working culture, which is maybe a bit unusual. So we're an organisation that tries to use sort of sociocratic principles, yeah, whether it's just in the facilitation of meetings or doing check-ins, you know, trying to bring a bit more of our humanity to meetings sometimes. So I think that can really help just build trust and understanding from a very early stage, like getting on the same page of what your ambitions are, what your dreams are, what you're scared about, could go wrong in this partnership. Doing all that sort of work right at the start, I think can go a long way when things get a bit tougher later on. You have that kind of shared, trust to begin with. So yeah, that would be my tips.
So ability to change gear and having a person that's your advocate that you can go to, and bringing your sort of cultural influence to the council. I'm just going to use my chair's privilege to ask, how does that go down in the council, having those more sort of sociocratic approaches?
Yeah, a tricky one to answer. And every local authority is vastly different. They've got many different policies, or let's say parties behind them in many cases. So, yeah, I guess it's a challenge. I think we're all willing to change and we're all willing to learn more, but at the speed we can do it is very varying. And as a councillor, we have to remember we're not in a paid role, we're not in an officer position, we do it around our family and our day jobs and things like that. And there are always conflicting, competing priorities, particularly within the authority. Often it's finance. Until there's a crisis, then the crisis wins and stuff. So doing the stuff that we really want to do is often least prioritised, I suppose, which is painful. But eventually, if people can stick with us, we do get there, I like to think. So, yeah, it is very different, and it's a challenge. But I think there's hope from me, definitely.
And relationships are a key part of that. Do you want to give your how you respond to the challenges of working with local authorities?
Yes. I'm sorry, but I'm also going to talk about timelines, but in a different way. It's really true that you have to be prepared to get things getting really slow, and then to do things in a hurry, like in 2 months when they are ready. And that was the case with the city of Paris. So there was a long work to build a partnership, and then we had to sign it within 1 month. And like, I just have an advice for civil society organization. If you are not a member of the board and if you work for them, I'm a co-director, so I don't have the final cut on anything. Actually, my board has is like to the key is information, like to keep your boards update about everything, even if you don't need them to make a decision. Then when you need them to make a decision, you can do an electronic vote or anything, and it's really quick. It's what we do and what we learned about that. And we have another timeline issue is electoral cycles on local authorities. We have a 6-year cycle in France. We are lucky, it's long, but we are going to complain anyway because we are French. And like, civil society organization like ours have long-term goals, especially a foundation. So even these 6 years cycle are quite fast for us, and like policy can change from an administration to another. And so we try to be as less political as we can, and we try to build strong relationship with everybody. And we also try to focus on things that are more consensual, like we go and talk a lot about food safety plans and including land in food safety plans, because if you start by talking about land property, it's like it's a great divide. You won't have everybody with you. And if you talk about food safety plans, everybody is with you. Nobody can disagree. So that's really a kind of tactic we have. It's not even a tactic because it's true. We also work on food safety plans, but that's the way we focus. And what I can say, we have also a challenge by balancing independence and collaboration, because we are a complex organization, but part of our organization, not the foundation, is depends on public subsidies. And so we have a global strategy to be not dependent 100% on public subsidies, to stay independent. And so we mix private funding, citizen funding, and public subsidies to stay independent. Well.
Patient work.
Yes.
And, yeah, makes sense to be like finding that common ground. Thank you. I'm going to be tag teaming with Rachel to alternate between questions from the floor and questions from our guests online around the world. Shall I go first?
Yeah, we don't have actually any online questions yet.
Okay. Well, brilliant. So let's start with the gentleman with a dark jumper at the back there.
One or two, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hear that okay? Yeah. That was really interesting, everybody. Specific question for Gary and Kim. Sorry if I missed this, but are you charging the farmers who are taking up the new opportunities on your land commercial rents?
Gary and Kim, are you charging commercial rents to your farmers on your land?
Yes, but I'll qualify that by not the local authority. We're putting the land into the partnership trust, if you like. So there will be what we would call a SPV, specific purpose vehicle, that will be formulated specifically to effectively take this land on, bank it, and flip it out into the next plot and the next plot. So yes, they will be charged, let's say, a commercial rent. It has to stand on its own 2 feet. We can't, as a local authority, we couldn't continue to subsidise this type of work. We have to release our assets for market value wherever we can, because we need the cash. But what we're hoping the trust will be able to do is to keep those rents affordable, but actually what we're trying to do, so they have an initial 5-year period to occupy the land and to prove their business model under the planning guidance. But if they're successful, at that point, they could apply for full planning, permanent dwelling residency, if you like, and the trust would look to sell them the remaining length of the lease, which should be 90 years. We can't do it freehold because we haven't got a freehold transfer, but the aim at that point, it would release effectively capital money. If they could afford to buy the land and the property and build their home or keep the one that we've built them, we'd then use that money to reinvest into the next plot and the next plot. So try and do it circular economy if we can, but yep. Yes.
So just to follow up, sorry if I may, I'm just trying to work out whether this model is applicable to a private landlord. Basically, I think it is, from what you said.
I think it is. The planning guidance certainly is. So the guidance isn't for the local authority, it's for the whole of the county.
Yeah.
And if a private landlord chose to follow our model, fantastic. And we have actually already got one interested. I think they'll probably wait 6 to 9 months a year to make sure that we've ironed out some of the issues. But if it works, great. We want to see it replicated by anyone that can.
Fantastic. Thank you.
So the council gets a sort of an equivalent income from this approach than they would if they didn't do this approach. Is that true?
For the first 5 years, yes. At the 5-year point, if they swap into a owned type entity, not a leased rented one, the council gets less, but the trust that's managing the land will get that and then can use that to do the next one. And as Matthieu said, invest that money wisely with alternative finances and use your 200,000 to do £1 million purchase on the next one, etc. That's the vision for the trust to be able to replicate this, but scale it up.
Is Paris charging commercial rents?
Yes, we have. It's not called commercial rents, but of course we have. Maybe you know that or not, but in France we have a specific rent for agriculture. It's a contract very particular for agriculture and for farmers. And so we have this, I call it rural lease, but I'm not sure about the translation. So this rural lease is really particular for farmers. And if you had some ecologic or environmental clauses, you can move the price. And that's why Paris had some environmental clause, so it's really affordable. And also in this rural lease, you can add housing or buildings, and the price is really affordable to my mind. Also, it's really a mandatory price. You can choose the price of your rural lease. It's linked to a national law. So yeah, we are not free.
If you don't mind, just a bit of a panel sort of response as well. One of the problems that we've got in Wales emerging, and it's happening all over the UK, is the price of agricultural land is just continuing to rocket. We're selling land from the authority now at £17,000 an acre. Utterly phenomenal that nobody can afford unless you're a big institutional company that wants to do a bit of greenwashing. Sorry, I'm slightly cynical there. But that's just not affordable and accessible, certainly to produce growers, and actually not really affordable to farmers. They're mortgaged to the hilt. It's a real challenge. So I guess our model is trying to not address that, because it's really hard to address that, but to at least think about how it might create the levers that lessen that impact. None of our veg growers could afford £17,000 an acre and still earn a living off it and feed their families with money. So yeah, it's just to highlight one of the real challenges we've got is land value.
And I think that really highlights the importance of the work that you're doing, because if at councils it's the easy option just to flog it, demonstrating its value for the council's own aspirations and for the public benefit is amazing. Another question. I think you had your hand up earlier, didn't you, with the blue scarf? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm from Portugal. My name is Inês. And my question is about the duration of the contracts, because we are doing that in Portugal also. And the contracts are they started with three years, and some farmers don't want to invest 3 years without knowing what is going to happen next. So I understand now that for you guys it's 5 years, and then if it's okay, you can go until the end of the life of the farmer. But I would like to understand a little bit more. Thank you. It's very interesting.
Thank you. Do you want to have a respond to that one?
Well, yeah, I think I'm covered. Yeah, let's go to France. It's almost a lifetime contract. So rural lease is 9 years in France, but it's automatically renewable, and it's really difficult for the owners to change farmers. It's quite impossible. It's impossible for us, because the only case you can withdraw your farmers from your land is if you want to cultivate yourself or your family wants to cultivate. So as a foundation, we can't do that. And furthermore, like the lease goes to your heirs. So you can't have your land back. That's sometimes a problem for private ownership, and that's sometimes a problem because people know when they will rent, they won't have their land back. So that's something we face.
Does that answer your question? Because yeah, there are pros and cons with different lengths of leases, aren't there? Thank you. There's a lady with an orange jumper.
My question, I'm Fabia from the Sustainable Food Trust. My question was really, I think, to Gary. You've set out so clearly how difficult it is to demonstrate the economic value of these projects when faced with these land prices. So how are you evaluating the other public goods that these projects are delivering for the land? You know, what's your system of valuation measure so that you can justify not selling land?
How do you measure the public goods?
I think the first thing that we've tried to do as a partnership is create that aspiration that food is a public good, because that's one of the challenges, isn't it? We don't necessarily value it in that way at the moment. It's commodity and it's market value and it's market driven. So that's for me just about dissemination, about language, about challenge, about having conversations. But what the partnership is and has done, so we talked about retaining that 5 acres of land within the partnership that will do something very public around biodiversity, nature gain, river restoration, flood alleviation, clean air, all the things that Welsh Government and the local authorities have in their clear policies of improving well-being. Putting a value to it is a challenge, and it's a real challenge, to be honest, because in terms of pounds and pence, we're going to struggle to get anywhere near that £17,000 an acre when a local authority is cash poor and needs some capital return. So I think our job, and that's where the partnership will remain in place supporting the growers and stuff, but it will do that evaluation, so it'll do that social economics, it'll do that community cohesion, it'll do that routes to market, and it'll just keep presenting it year on year and saying, look, actually, yeah, you might not have got your £17,000 an acre on this particular plot, but you've got all of these other benefits, and then we have to make sure the local authority and the other public bodies engage in it. We take them to site physically, we drag them if we have to, we get the schools involved, and that gets the education team on board. All of those sorts of things are possible, but yeah, pounds and pence is what the local authority want to see, and we have to convince them that's not all they need to focus on. It's those other wider social values. So I think it's going to be a learning curve for us. We'll need help, most definitely, but I think we'll hopefully produce the right results. Thank you. Good question.
Do you want to answer that? Do you and how do you try and measure the value? The
value of our land.
Yeah, the value of using it in that way.
I'm not sure I get what is the question.
Actually, it's not costing a lot. It's a better answer, like, yeah.
If I may, just because we've started to introduce how France has this like very heavily regulated rural land system that a lot of European countries envy us. Our land prices are nowhere near what you've said, and the rent of the rural land is also very low. It's still like profitable to sell it as a local authority, but you have to argue much less about keeping it in because it's not as profitable to sell it. So but in general, I think this question of measuring the public good is like, that's produced from farming. It's like way broader than our session, and it's just very difficult, right? But just have to be convinced about it.
Right, and like whatever the value of land is, whatever the value of housing is, we all need a home, and whatever the value of land is, we all need to eat, and we need food off it. Let me take another question at the back there with the green shirt. Have you got a microphone to run around with? Ready? Okay. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, guys. I just want to say thanks for sharing some very cool and sexy projects. They sound really good fun, so cheers. I had a question just around, when we're talking about sort of 17,000 a hectare, that sort of thing, where you are either incentivized to sell public land assets or where you're perhaps forced into it as well. I'm wondering what powers you do have or wish you had to ensuring that land still is either used for good stuff or is actually prevented from, bad stuff happening on it.
What powers do you wish you had?
Yeah, I could tell you about the powers we do or don't have, Tom. Good question. And I'll clarify, it's £17,000 an acre. So what's that, £35,000 a hectare that we're currently selling land at? Gosh, that can't continue, I hope. What powers do we have? Very little. And in fact, we have almost negative powers that says we have to create best value for our assets. It's public money, it's owned by the public. We shouldn't be giving it away. There is a very small clause in legislation that says if there is very good reason and a very strong business case, we can sell it or trade it below market value. And then you can argue what's market value and how below that might you be willing to go. So we don't really have powers to not sell it at best price, if I'm honest. It's a real struggle. And yes, the pressures on our local authority and almost every other local authority and public body are just immense. I'm not sure if I should say this publicly, but I will. We've got a £50 million deficit in our budgets over the next 5 years. The farm estate in Powys has to release £10 million a year for the next 5 years, just in pure capital cash terms. That's immense. And lots of other local authorities that have got assets are in the same boat. And the risk is if you end up in what's called a 1-for-1 situation where you're effectively bankrupt as a local authority, you can't technically go bankrupt, but they don't actually parachute in, but you have to asset strip your entire local authority in order to recover your financial position. So in our authority, the first thing to go would be the farm estate en masse. They would just sell it. And then actually, interestingly, you begin to flood the market with land and the land value comes down. I'm not sure that's a positive, but certainly not for the authority perhaps, but in terms of those might want to buy land. So there isn't anything out there really that helps us. What we have got is policy across England and Wales around community asset transfers. And that's why, perhaps frustratingly for the partnership, the transfer of the Sarn land is under a community asset transfer, and therefore it's a long leasehold, 95 years. So it's a good length of time to do some funky stuff with, but it's not a freehold one that you'd like to. But actually the reason the local authority do that is because they can retain some control. They could put some covenants, some clauses, some lease agreements that actually if you stop doing good things with that land, we might kick you off and take it back. And I think that's probably right. So you've got to protect the asset. Whereas if you've just freehold it out, yes, you could put covenants on, but you're effectively saying, get on and do what you want with it. And we don't necessarily want to do that yet. Perhaps that's a bit of trust, I'm not sure. But good question, Tom. Thank you.
I mean, Powys is like facing quite different challenges, but do you want to comment on what powers you wish that you had?
It's too much. On Farmland, maybe. Today, I feel like we have Farmland, we have good opportunity to have a Farmland, but we don't have farmers and new entrants. And I feel like if we let this politics and so on, we need people to farm and to produce. And that may be a good wish for the next year.
There's also, because of that renewable lease thing, you can't really get a farmer off your public land if they're under that kind of lease. So often the local authorities wish they had the power to shift the farmers' practices towards more organic, because sometimes they're like generations old leases, and they can't really force the farmer to adopt better agricultural practices. So maybe that's an issue that we have with this type of lease. But thankfully, the environmental rural lease that now exists in the law makes it so that you can introduce environmental conditions, but you can't force it upon farmers who already had the regular lease. So,
on the other hand, I would add that, like, when you own the land and you have a lease that's only for organic farming, we face the challenge that, like, the market for organic farming is now not really good, and it's been down for 2 years. And the magical power I wish I had was to make something for that, and like convince my government to act on it, because there is many ways to act on it. I won't tell about it here, but they can do a lot of things, and they don't act that much.
Thank you. Should we take the online question?
Yeah. So this is a question from Diane. Setting up a veg growing operation will often mean little or no income in the first year or so. Are there ways to support new entrants to set up for that period?
Yeah, so I'll answer that one from the Future Farms Partnership. Yeah, absolutely. It's something we're really considering on rent breaks, if you like. Almost a profit share, let's say profit or turnover share. So once you start making money, can you then afford to pay? Because actually. That's one of the challenges we took. So in terms of traditional planning legislation, you would have 3 years to prove your business, and it takes that and a bit longer. So that's why we recognised it, put it into 5 years. But during those 5 years, they are going to struggle. I think we have no doubt about that. Year 1 and 2, absolutely, you're trying to work out what investment you can bring with you to keep sustaining yourself, whilst we in the partnership still need a bit of money out of you. So we haven't actually, it was interesting, we published the opportunities for growers without any details or any hint of what we might charge them. Quite brave, you might say, or silly. I'm not sure. And that's really because we still haven't knuckled that down. We're getting closer, and we're now working with the growers that we've recruited. So we want it a bit of a balance. And the pressure, I think, on the trust is this has to be a replicable model. So even though we've funded this and de-risked it a bit with some public money, it's going to be hard to do that again and again and again. So yes, we could lower the rents even on this one even further, in my opinion, but actually does that help you build the sustainable model for the Farmland Trust to go and do the next one? It's a challenge. So I think what we're doing is willing to talk to the farmers, work with them, be very sympathetic to that issue that they're going to have, and absolutely realistic. It's a real challenge. And the other thing we're going to do is work really hard to support them with their routes to market. So they're good at growing, but we know it's a challenge when you're a good grower to do all the other business things that you need to do. So give them support where we can, even if we're still charging a financial income from them. Thank you.
Do you want to add to that, Kim?
I mean, just quickly, I think for me, this is why we need a proper new entrant support scheme, whether it's at the government, national level, or devolved nation level. There's been pilot of it, there's been different bits here and there, but I think, you know, any kind of business getting off the ground needs enterprise support, basically, to deal with those first few years. So I think, you know, every local authority could try and work out how to do it differently, or different civil society organisations could. But for me, I mean, that's just given the generational renewal in farming that needs to happen quite rapidly. I think that would be a strong case for a proper, comprehensive new entrant support scheme, specifically for horticulture, especially from the government.
How's it working at Terre de Liens, supporting new entrants?
Yeah, it's it's more depending on the French state, and like often we have like farmers that come from other part of the society that are like almost 35 or 40 and that had other job before. And when you do that in France, you have a 2 years your unemployment dole. So you have an income for 2 years. That helps a lot when you don't have an income for the first year of your settlement. And we are holding the fort in EU for you, waiting for you to come back. And and we have the European policy that helps like farmers at the beginning for organic farming when they start. But it's not ideal, and a lot of them face really strong challenges with income at the first year of their activities. It's not really perfect.
Thank you. Do you want to add to that?
Yes, just shortly, the city of Paris also have some program of training, and so she finance study and vocational reconversion or conversion, professional conversion. No? When you want to change your job, you can ask for funds for Paris, the city of Paris. And also this year they create a testing farm where you can. It's a farm split in 2 parts, and 2 farmers are training themselves with senior farmers, let's say, teaching them how to do or advise them. And it's a really good opportunity because when you're new farmers, and you are urban citizens, it's great to keep your social contact, social relationship, economic relationship, before to find a place outside of the city in a bigger land. So it's maybe it could be a strategy for Paris to create more testing farm, or I don't know, incubator farms. Yeah.
And I mean, this was the point of county farms, wasn't it? That it was an opportunity for new entrants to go in. Have we got another one from online, or shall we keep going here?
We've got one more from online, but
okay.
we can
No, go on.
Okay. So Marianne says, do we need a wholesale shift in public attitudes to whose land it is in England and Wales? Not the name in the land registry, but a sense of ownership, belonging and responsibility.
Ooh. Who wants to have a go at that one? Who owns the land? Kim, I feel like this is yours.
Yeah, I feel like I should say something. Yes, that would be nice. I think that there's so many issues in that question to unpack. I don't quite know where to start. I mean, like at shared assets, we would love to see a completely different relationship, a non-commodity based relationship to land where everybody feels like they have that sense of belonging. I feel like in certain parts of the UK we're at least baby steps closer to that. Like I feel like in Scotland, because of all the conversations around land reform and right to roam and things like that, the public has more of a sense of, this is our land as a kind of nation, and there's a lot more outrage about the size of a very few aristocratic landowners owning most of the land. I think we're a bit further behind in England, certainly. There's so many parts to that, but I think we need a whole scale sort of narrative shift in who the land truly belongs to, who really creates the value from it in terms of people who work the land, the legacies of enslavement and colonialism that have led to some people owning vast amounts of land while other people don't have any. There's so many parts to that question, but yes, we need a completely different relationship with land in this country. And that is probably the work of generations, but there's many organisations here and beyond who are working on that in different ways. But yeah, that's what I would like to see.
Do you want to say a little about how you're working on it? Like it's a generation's work, but where do we start with that?
I think it's far beyond the work of one organisation. It has to be tackled on multiple levels in different ways. So there's lots of great conversations happening in the Justice Hub or the Justice Strand of ORFC, which I'd really encourage you all to go and see it over at the Story Museum, where people are talking about reparations and what a sort of reparative approach to transfer of land or use of land could be. There's people working on, like I said, kind of narrative change. We've done a bit of that work ourselves at Shared Assets a few years ago to try and prompt people to think differently about land, not just as a kind of commodity. There's all the work to do with new entrant support, like we've been talking about here, but also I think more could be done so that more people from all different sorts of backgrounds see farming and working on the land as a possibility for them, which it's not at the minute for income reasons, for kind of psychological safety reasons, and so on. So I think if more people have the opportunity to kind of develop those nurturing relationships with the land and be part of land at a much wider scale than they maybe are at the minute, then there'll be more, I guess, public appetite to change the way we relate to land at the minute. There's so many ways I could go on all day, but I'll stop there for now.
Thank you.
Maybe I can answer about ownership and responsibility, who owns the land, especially for Paris. So as I explained to you, Paris is really a central district, urban district, and who have land, the land are situated in rural area, sometimes really far, 100 kilometers or 200 kilometers far from Paris. So yeah, it's always a question of legitimacy, because Paris as a project, she want to install an organic farm, but what it's the meaning and what is the need of the inhabitants around these local future farms, and it's always a question, and it's always a discussion with local authority, local actors, and we try to manage all these needs, willingness, and yeah.
Thank you. Would you like to comment on that? I mean, how different countries and different viewpoints in Europe.
Well, just from my point of view, facilitating this working group on local authorities, I think trying to find ambassadors and pioneers within institutions, because it's good to work with the activists but also try to convert like within more established administrations that you can do differently as what we're trying to do as well with the Access to Land Network. Then we have a strand of work at advocacy at the EU level, but that's just like about trying to put land back on the radar of the European Commission. And that's, yeah, if they start talking about it again, that will already be a victory.
Thank you. Would you like it? Thank you. 5 minutes left, so maybe one more question. I'm going to go to the guy at the back there with the grey top, because you haven't spoken yet. I'm just going to stand up because I can see you then.
Hi, thank you. For Gary and Kim, is it? Sorry, yeah. For context, sorry, I came in late. Planning permission for tunnel space and protected cropping, is that on the agenda, or does that exist?
Yeah, good question. Every local authority would answer it differently, I'm sure, and probably each planning officer might answer it differently. In Powys, I can give you some examples of where the planning team are shifting to realising that polytunnels are essential for fresh food production and part of the process, so therefore should be permitted. There's a question mark over whether you have to apply to have them or not, and the current thinking is if it is more of the modern, movable, creepable, caterpillar type tunnels, then don't even ask, just get up and do it, and at least you're moving it every so often. The issue they have is when you start putting foundations in for bigger hoops and more permanent structures, that the metalwork would stay there even if you're reskinning it every 5 or 10 years. They're a bit hesitant, so they wouldn't officially say don't apply and don't tell us. And if you applied, you'd probably get it, but then you've got to pay the fees. And actually, in Wales now, anything over 10 square metres tips you into a SUDS application as well. So you pay your planning fee and you pay your SUDS application fee, and two very different processes with quite complex issues around each. And then you say as a grower, it's only cost me 2,000 quid for that polytunnel. My earning is only £5,000 a year, and you now charge me £5,000 just for the planning permission. Doesn't make sense, does it? But where we've come across issues is, let's say Herefordshire, for example, in arguably just covering its rural green space with polytunnels and then having adverse impacts in terms of flooding and all of that sort of stuff. We have to protect a bit about that, and I guess we're still a bit burying our heads in the sand and having a bit of a deliberation. But we've got some clear steerage that movable, creeping, and they can be ginormous. They can be massive, these things. Okay, don't even bother applying, just get on and do with it. But they would say, come and talk to us about anything other than that at the moment in Powys. But I think if you asked every local authority, you'd probably get a different answer, sadly.
Yeah. Sorry, just to come back on that. For context, I'm a grower working roughly 6 acres, and it's the protected cropping, the tunnel space, that props up largely our income. And without that, I would really question the financial viability of small-scale market gardens in Wales. I'm also in Wales. And also with it being incredibly seasonal, if that protected cropping space doesn't exist, it then becomes a very seasonal profession, and then what's being done then to support growers in the off-season? Because it's not an easy transition to come out of a growing season and then into something else as well.
No, you're absolutely right. What I will say is, in Wales, under the partnership and with other members of different partnerships, we've been challenging Welsh Government particularly to look at the thresholds for permitted development rights. So currently, if you've got a farm in England and or Wales at the moment, and you've got over 5 hectares and you've got buildings and stuff on it, you can just ask the authority under a 28-day notice, write them a letter saying, I want to build X shed, X polytunnels, and they can be up to 4,000 square foot. So ginormous. As long as they don't go over 13 metres high, you just write them a letter and say, I want to build it. And if they don't get back to you in 28 days, you just crack on. They might come back within 28 days and say, oh, hang on, not sure about that. But if they don't, you just get on and do it. But you've got to have 5 hectares of land and existing buildings to do that. So we've challenged Welsh Government as hard as we can. We think that's going to be lowered. And in SFS payment benefits, it's come down to 3 hectares. That's a start, that's an indication. But if you looked at Scotland, theirs is something like 0.72 of a hectare to tip into that permitted development. So vastly different. So yes, you wouldn't have it if you've just got a back garden with a small pony paddock and stuff like that. But if you're in commercial growing, our argument is you need that flexibility to just get on and do it without, it could take you 9 months to get planning permission for a polytunnel in our authority if it was in a challenging area. So yeah, I can't give advice, but I say avoid it if you can. So therefore look at what's possible under the radar, if you like, in terms of what's okay. And if you need to do something that's not okay, have a conversation with the planners to start with to see what's possible. Yeah, sorry.
Thank you. And so I just feel like coming out of this, so much is possible. Not only so much is possible, but so much is already happening. And there are examples on the ground of so many different ways of going about this. So I hope this session has given you courage and encouragement. And I hope you'll go and check out the access to land to see more of those. And thank you very much to all of our panel.